Hi, everybody. It's Jay, and I am back in the booth with you for another sneak peek video preview for this week's new release here on Say with Jay. This week, our new release is Around the Next Bend. It's book number 4 in Jessie Gussman's Raspberry Ridge Sweet Beach Romance series. And I've got more about the story, a live preview reading for you in just a minute. But first, as Jessie sometimes does, she has included a dish within the scope of this story, and I'm going to make it for you here today, in yet another segment we like to call Cooking with Jay. This time, we're making rotisserie chicken with stuffing casserole. It's a surprisingly quick-to-come-together meal, so it's great for a weeknight. It's great for company. It's even good for that next church potluck. It can be made ahead of time and baked later. And it also stores well, leftovers, if you have any left. So, without any further ado, let's get started making rotisserie chicken and stuffing casserole. Now, as always, don't worry about trying to get these ingredients down in real time. They will be down in the description of this video. That said, also, I don't have all of the ingredients here, and I'll explain what I mean in just a moment. You're going to need 2 boxes of stovetop stuffing mix, 1 whole rotisserie chicken, or in my case, I'm using rotisserie chicken breast from Costco. That works out to be about 3 cups of chicken, but you want that cooked and shredded. You're going to need 3 cups of chicken broth, 1/4 cup of butter, 3 stalks of celery, 1 onion, and the 2 of those things you're going to want diced. You're going to need 1 can of cream of chicken soup, 1 can cream of mushroom soup. You're going to need 8 ounces of sour cream, and salt and pepper to taste. Now, what I meant about not showing all the ingredients here, the original recipe, which I had not made before, calls for 1 package of stovetop stuffing mix, or more if you want. As you'll see, when we got into assembling this casserole, I realized very quickly that 1 package is not enough. So my recommendation is 2 boxes, and if you want less, go with 1. But I think 2 boxes is the right call here. So for your first step, you're going to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and lightly spray a 9x13 baking pan with cooking spray. Next, you're going to bring your chicken broth to a boil in a medium saucepan and add in the stuffing mix once the liquid boils. You're going to stir that up really well, cover it, and let it sit for 5 minutes. Essentially, you're following the directions for making the stuffing on the box, with the exception that you're not putting any butter in that step. Also, I made my 2 batches separately because, as I mentioned before, I didn't really know I was going to be doing both. I'm assuming that you can make 2 boxes at once. I don't see any reason why not. You may have to use a larger saucepan, but, plan accordingly. So, as I said, once that comes to a boil, you add your stuffing mix, stir it up in the broth really well, remove that pan from the heat and cover it and let it sit to the side. Next, in a skillet, you're going to heat up your butter and add your diced onion and diced celery, and you're going to cook that until softened over medium high-ish heat. You want to just make sure that it doesn't burn or anything like that, but I found 5 minutes, the time that your stuffing is sitting, is pretty much the perfect amount of time to cook your onions and celery. Again, you just want them softened a bit. Next, you're going to mix your soups and your sour cream together in a bowl and stir that up really well. Next, and I apologize, the first part of this I didn't get on camera, user error, But you're going to place your shredded chicken at the bottom of your baking dish, then layer your onions and celery over the meat. Then top the chicken and onion and celery with your soup mixture. Then you're going to top with the stuffing mix and spread it around evenly. Then it goes in the oven, into your 350-degree oven for 1 hour, and bake it until it is bubbly and browned. When it's ready, take it out of the oven, let it sit for a few minutes, 5 to 10, to let it cool down just a bit before you plate it up. And here it is. I'm having mine with a side salad. You can have it with whatever you like, but it is absolutely wonderful. It's savory. The onions and celery still have a tiny bit of texture. They're not just mush. It just tastes fantastic. And folks, there you go. It is absolutely fantastic. I hope you will give it a try, and if you do, please let me know how it goes down in the comments. All right, let's talk a little bit more about Around the Next Bend. Around the Next Bend is the story of Mertie Jardine. She and her sisters have come to Raspberry Ridge to clean up, and sell their family's mansion there because of the fairly recent death of her parents. They hadn't lived in Raspberry Ridge for quite some time. They moved away when Mertie was a teenager. But now they're back. Now, Mertie is a nationally recognized and famous Christian author and speaker. But she harbors a secret that no one knows about, save one person. That is her best friend, Garnet Irving. I say best friend, her best friend growing up, because once she moved to Chicago, they had lost touch somewhat, until she came to Garnet one dark night needing his help. Garnet is from Raspberry Ridge, obviously, and he is back in town because, first, he is moving back to help his elderly parents, and his father has recently suffered a stroke, and he's also candidating, auditioning, if you're not familiar with that term, to be the pastor of the church there in Raspberry Ridge. And Garnet has kept Mertie's secret, but now it appears that that secret may be about to come out, whether either of them want it to or not. How will they handle it, and what is around the next bend for them? Well, you're going to have to come back this Friday to find out. But for now, here is a selection from Around the Next Bend. Hope you enjoy it. Then come back this Friday for the full release here on Say with Jay. Okay, before I begin, I meant to mention this before I started the live reading, but I forgot. My apologies. Typically, I start at the beginning of the book, but for this scene, I'm going to pick up after our story has started, so let me fill you in on where we are. Mertie has been in town for a day and a half, and she is interested in getting her parents' house cleaned up and on the market so she can get back out of town just as quickly as she can. But her sister Amara talks her into going to an early morning Bible study, and that's where our scene begins. Taking her piece of casserole to the porch steps, she didn't wait for a chair, but stepped down 2 steps and sat down. There was a man on a chair right at the top of the steps, his feet stretched out and crossed, his Bible in his lap and a pen in his hand, as he made a note on the small notebook he had on one knee. He looked up casually as she walked by and nodded a greeting. He looked familiar, the way Vera Miller looked familiar. Probably someone she had known 20 years ago but didn't recognize now. She wasn't going to be in town long, and as the man looked right back down at his notebook, she didn't introduce herself but took a seat on the second step down and said a silent prayer over her casserole before she began to eat. She assumed the eating happened before the teaching, maybe so the casserole wouldn't get cold or to give people time to wander in. Someone came out with more chairs, and a couple more people arrived, while Mertie finished her casserole and opened her Bible to Deuteronomy 10, which she had overheard in a conversation above her head would be the starting place for them today. "Good morning, Connie," an older woman said as she gingerly sat down on the step by Mertie's knee, calling her by her mother's name. "Good morning, and Connie is actually my mother. I'm Mertie, her oldest daughter." The woman's eyes, a little rheumy and confused, narrowed as her brows drew down. "You couldn't be. She didn't have children," she said, sounding like she knew exactly what she was talking about. "She has Alzheimer's." The man above her spoke softly, for her ears only. Mertie didn't even look up but just lifted her head, acknowledging his words and thinking about how familiar his voice sounded before she looked back at the woman. "Of course, my mistake," she said, keeping herself from saying "my bad" at the last moment. The woman probably wouldn't understand the modern-day slang. "This is my mother, Gertie." Homer came over, offering her coffee, lifting up the pot he held in a silent question. She shook her head. Too much coffee and she got exceptionally hyper. She had to limit her intake. "I remember Gertie," she said fondly, thinking about the woman who always had a cookie to offer her after school, or a cold drink of lemonade on a hot summer day when they were walking down to the Pebble Beach. It was sad that she was suffering from Alzheimer's, and it made Mertie feel a nostalgic homesickness that she hadn't felt in forever. Of course, she couldn't remember those days without thinking of Garnet and how they had been inseparable until her family had moved away. He had been her best friend since she was old enough to remember having friends. Her sisters had tagged along when she and Garnet had allowed it, but they always seemed rather immature and young. Garnet and she had ridden their bikes together, climbed the bluffs together, and swum in the lake together. They had been allowed to swim as long as they had a buddy, and she and Garnet were each other's buddies. Of course, she couldn't think of Garnet without remembering that last fateful time she had seen him, seeing the disappointment in his eyes, and hearing him ask her if she would do the one thing she knew she couldn't. Through the years, every once in a while she would wonder what would have happened if she would have said yes. But she made a different decision, and she never allowed herself to look back with regret. Just keep her eyes forward and concentrated on what God wanted her to do. Gertie was rambling on about something that her mother would probably know exactly what she was talking about, but Mertie had no idea, so she just nodded and tried to say things that would not set the older lady off. Finally, after about 10 minutes of chatting and finishing up their breakfast casserole, the man above her cleared his throat and said, "I think it's about time for us to get started, and I wanted to thank you all for coming. Maybe you were expecting Homer to be leading us today, but Homer asked me to, since I am candidating at the church, and he thought it would give everyone a chance to hear me a little more." The man's voice held humor, like he wasn't sure why anyone would want to hear him more, and Mertie liked the confident way he spoke, while still allowing a bit of humor in his tone. As he spoke, her eyes were caught on a young teenaged girl who had been sitting on a tire swing in the front yard. As the man spoke, she had closed her book, got off the swing, and started walking slowly through the yard, picking her Bible and notebook up from where they sat on the ground near the sidewalk. She started to make her way toward the porch while the man mentioned that he had grown up in Raspberry Ridge and had moved in with his parents, who were getting older and needed and appreciated him coming back to give them a hand with the yard work and upkeep on their big, old, empty house. And some of you already know that I have a daughter. Her name is Dabney, and she'll be joining us. Because she wants to, not because I'm making her, he said, and that humor was back. Mertie heard it in his voice as his daughter lifted her eyes, and Mertie found herself looking into eyes that were the exact same shade of blue as her own. As her eyes roved over the girl's face, she realized the features were very familiar as well. Even the hair color was the same as hers. It couldn't be. "Oh," the man above her said, "I guess I should start out with my name. For those of you who haven't been talking to the pastoral committee, I'm Garnet Irving, and I'm here to candidate to be the new preacher at the Raspberry Ridge Bible Church." Mertie felt the world tilt and sway, and she put a hand beside her, grabbing the banister, taking a deep breath, trying to clear her head. Garnet Irving. No wonder the man's voice had sounded so familiar. No wonder he had looked familiar. It was Garnet. She didn't say a word to anyone, simply grasped her notebook and Bible in one hand, her coffee cup in the other, jumped up and hurried off the steps, all but running down the sidewalk and fleeing headlong into the healing garden. Knowing that if she ran home, everyone on the porch would be able to see her the entire way, and only wanting to get away from the prying eyes and out of the presence of the one person who knew her deepest, darkest secret, Garnet Irving. Hi, this is Jay, and thanks for listening. If you're ready for another great audiobook, here's one we think you might like. Or check out the playlist with all our latest releases. Don't forget to subscribe to Say with Jay, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us what you liked in the comments.